Warning! On tonight's episode of Data and Dissonance, we're doing something different before we dive back into headlines and hot takes. If you're looking for instant outrage, this isn't that. At least not yet. Tonight starts with a conversation about priorities, about stepping away from the noise, and about what actually matters when the microphones turn off. Sometimes the most important decisions aren't political, they're personal, and that's where we begin.
Last week we weren't here. No episode drops, no drive time breakdown, no MAGA fire, no red pill rant, no conspiracy board. And I saw the messages. Where you at? Everything good? Did the libs finally silence you? No, nothing dramatic, nothing scandalous, no shadow ban, no cancellation. Teresa and I were in Louisiana. I was with my mom. And here's the truth. Time is undefeated. You don't get it back. You don't rewind it. You don't bookmark it for later. When your mom is getting older, when the calendar starts meaning more than it used to, you make decisions differently. We went to Mardi Gras. We hit the parades. We slowed down. We laughed. We had real conversations without a camera in the corner and without me mentally drafting the next segment in my head. And somewhere between the beads flying and the brass bands playing, I realized something that matters more than any trending headline. Real life doesn't care about the algorithm. The news cycle will spin without you. Politicians will posture without you. Outrage will regenerate like it always does. But family, moments, those are finite. I didn't step away because I had to. I stepped away because I chose to. And if this show stands for anything, conservative values, personal responsibility, faith, family, then I'd be a hypocrite if I preached that and didn't live it. So yeah, we missed a week, but we didn't miss what mattered. All right, we're back in the saddle, and the crew is in the building. First up, Brian. If you thought a week off cooled him down, you don't know Brian. He's been storing MAGA fire like a propane tank in July, and I can already see the grin. If there's a policy win, he's celebrating it. If there's government waste, he's torching it. And if the left did something wild while we were gone, which I'm sure they did, he's ready to unload. Rachel's here, steady as always. Independent mind, sharp takes, and probably the only one on this panel who can tell all of us to calm down without starting a civil war. She brings perspective when things get heated and reminds us that nuance still exists in a world that profits off extremes. Daniel's back at the board, connecting dots we didn't even know were in the same zip code. While we were offline, I guarantee he was screenshotting, bookmarking, archiving, and building a web of coincidences that somehow always seem to connect. If there's a pattern under the pattern, Daniel sees it. And of course, Skylar's here, coming in from the progressive side, ready to push back on everything we think is common sense and remind us that policy hits real people in real ways. She keeps this from becoming an echo chamber, and whether you agree with her or not, she makes the argument sharper. And me, I'm Artie. Still conservative, still opinionated, still not apologizing for believing what I believe. But maybe just a little more grounded this week after stepping away and remembering why we fight these battles in the first place. This is Data and Dissonance. Let's get into it. While we were down in Louisiana, something interesting happened. The world didn't end. The news cycle kept spinning. Politicians kept talking. Social media kept screaming. Cable news kept breaking urgent stories every 6 hours. And yet, structurally, nothing collapsed because we missed a week. And that got me thinking, we live in a culture that manufactures urgency. Everything is DEFCON 1. Every headline is the most important headline in American history. Every policy disagreement is the end of democracy or the collapse of the republic. Every tweet becomes a 5-alarm fire. But if everything is urgent, then nothing is. The outrage machine doesn't sleep. It regenerates, it refreshes, it reloads. And the more you feed it, the more it demands. That's true for politicians. That's true for media. And honestly, that's true for creators too. There's this pressure now, especially in political commentary, that if you're not reacting in real time, you're irrelevant. If you don't have a take within minutes, you've lost the narrative. If you step away, the algorithm punishes you. But here's the question, is that urgency real or is it engineered? Rachel, you live in that independent middle ground more than anyone here. From your perspective, has our culture confused constant reaction with actual importance? And is the non-stop outrage cycle doing more damage than the policies themselves?
You're absolutely right that we've confused reaction speed with moral seriousness. Somewhere along the line, having an instant opinion became more valuable than having an informed one. Social media didn't just accelerate the news cycle, It rewired how people interpret importance. If a story trends, it feels existential. If it doesn't, it feels irrelevant. That's dangerous, because real policy shifts, the ones that affect inflation, healthcare, border enforcement, civil liberties, often unfold slowly, buried under layers of bureaucracy that don't generate viral clips. Meanwhile, a poorly worded tweet or a 10-second video clip can dominate national attention for days. We're emotionally training ourselves to respond to spikes, not substance. And the constant outrage? It's profitable. Outrage keeps people engaged. Engagement drives at revenue. Revenue fuels media ecosystems on both sides. So there's very little incentive to slow down. But when everything is framed as a 5-alarm fire, people burn out. They either harden into tribal loyalty or they disengage completely. Neither outcome strengthens a republic. Democracies require informed citizens, not permanently agitated ones. Stepping away for a week doesn't weaken your voice. It might actually strengthen it because you return with clarity instead of cortisol.
That's a powerful point. Clarity instead of cortisol. I like that. Because you're right, outrage is monetized now. It's not accidental. The louder the headline, the longer people stay glued. And if you can keep citizens emotionally elevated, angry, afraid, vindicated, they don't have time to step back and evaluate. And I'll say this, conservatives are not immune to that. We talk a lot about media manipulation from the left, and there's truth in that critique, but the right has its own outrage engines too. If we're serious about responsibility and family values, we can't live in a permanent fight or flight state either. That's not leadership, that's addiction. But here's where I want to push this further. Brian, you're the guy who thrives in high-energy political moments. You call out government overreach, you celebrate policy wins, and you don't shy away from calling out what you see as corruption. So let me ask you this. Is some of that urgency justified right now? Or do you think even the conservative movement risks exhausting its own base by keeping everything dialed to 11 all the time?
Look, I'm not going to pretend urgency is fake across the board, because some of it is absolutely justified. When you're talking about border policy, crime spikes, inflation squeezing working families, or federal agencies expanding power beyond what they were ever designed to do, that's not manufactured drama. That's real-world impact. People feel that at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in their neighborhoods. So yeah, sometimes you raise your voice because complacency is how bad policy sticks. The reason the right pushes hard is because we've seen what happens when you don't. Bureaucracies don't shrink on their own. Government doesn't voluntarily hand power back. If citizens don't stay engaged, things drift. And drift usually means more control, more spending, and less accountability. But here's where I agree with Rachel. If everything is treated like DEFCON 1, the base gets exhausted. You can't live in constant emergency mode. There's a difference between sustained awareness and permanent outrage. If conservatives believe in strength and stability, then we need to model that. Strong doesn't mean frantic. Strong means steady. You can call out corruption without living in a cortisol loop. You can celebrate wins without acting like the sky is falling every morning. If we want longevity as a movement, not just viral moments, we have to learn how to stay sharp without burning out the very people we're trying to mobilize.
Brian, that's the balance right there. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused about what we're even talking about tonight. Because you're right. There are moments that demand urgency. Border policy matters. Inflation matters. Crime policy matters. The expansion of federal power matters. Those aren't online hypotheticals. Those hit families in the real world. And pretending everything is fine when it isn't? That's weakness, not virtue. But here's the difference. Urgency doesn't have to equal chaos. What I saw last week, stepping away from the noise, is that the machine doesn't stop. It never stops. It feeds on reaction. It feeds on outrage. And if we're not careful, we start thinking the volume of our reaction determines the strength of our conviction. It doesn't. Strength is consistency. Strength is long-term discipline. Strength is being able to say, yes, this matters, but I'm not going to let it consume my entire existence. Because if we burn ourselves out emotionally every single day, we lose perspective. And movements without perspective don't last. And I'll say something else. Conservatives talk a lot about family values. If we're serious about that, then family can't just be a campaign slogan. It has to show up in how we live. It has to show up in the decision to shut the phone off and sit at the dinner table. It has to show up in taking a week to be a son. Otherwise, we're just yelling about principles we don't actually practice. So the real question isn't whether urgency exists, it's who controls it. And that's where I want to bring Daniel in. Daniel, let's go a layer deeper. Brian made the point that some urgency is justified. Rachel talked about monetized outrage. But here's what I want to ask you, because this is your territory. Is some of this urgency intentionally engineered, not just amplified, engineered? We've watched over the past decade how narratives form almost instantly. Headlines synchronize, language gets repeated across networks, social media platforms push certain clips while burying others, algorithms reward anger, politicians fundraise off fear, influencers build brands off panic. So here's the bigger question. Are we living in a system that benefits from keeping citizens in a low-level state of agitation? And if so, who actually profits from that, politically, economically, culturally? Because if urgency is manufactured at scale, then stepping away for a week isn't just a personal reset. It's an act of resistance. What do you see when you zoom out?
When you zoom out far enough, you stop seeing random spikes and start seeing structure. Modern media ecosystems are built on engagement metrics, clicks, watch time, shares, reactions. The content that performs best emotionally is content that triggers anger, fear, or moral outrage. That's not a partisan observation. It's a business model observation. Platforms optimize for engagement because engagement equals revenue. Political actors understand that. Media organizations understand that. Advocacy groups understand that. When urgency becomes the most profitable emotional state, systems will naturally reward whoever can generate it consistently. That doesn't require a secret room or a shadow council. It just requires incentives lining up in the same direction. The deeper layer is psychological. Constant agitation narrows cognitive bandwidth. When people are emotionally elevated, they're less likely to evaluate nuance and more likely to default to tribal alignment. That benefits political fundraising, it benefits campaign mobilization, and it benefits media ratings. It also discourages long-form thinking, which is dangerous in a republic built on deliberation. So yes, I would argue that engineered urgency isn't always coordinated, but it is systemic. The structure itself incentivizes it, and when you step away from that structure, even briefly, you interrupt the feedback loop. You regain perspective. You remember that civic engagement should be intentional, not compulsive.
Daniel, what you said about incentives is what sticks with me. Because once you understand incentives, you stop looking for villains and start looking at structure. And that's a much more uncomfortable conversation, because it means the problem isn't just them, it's the system we all participate in. If outrage pays, outrage spreads. If fear mobilizes, fear gets marketed. And whether it's campaign fundraising emails, cable news panels, viral clips, or independent creators chasing engagement, we're all swimming in the same current. But here's where I draw a line. Recognizing the structure doesn't mean surrendering to it. It means choosing not to be ruled by it. And that's what stepping away last week reminded me of. That civic engagement should be intentional, not compulsive. If we let algorithms dictate our emotional temperature, we stop being citizens and start being reactors. And I refuse to live like that. But I also don't want this conversation to turn into everyone's manipulated and nothing matters, because that's not true either. Skylar, let's bring you in here. From your side of the aisle, do you see this same incentive-driven outrage cycle? Or do you think conservatives overplay the idea of engineered urgency when they're the ones under criticism? And here's the bigger layer. When progressives talk about climate, healthcare, social justice, issues they view as urgent, how do you separate legitimate alarm from algorithmic amplification? Where's that line?
I actually think the incentive structure you're all describing is real, but I think it gets weaponized differently depending on who's talking about it. When conservatives say engineered outrage, it often sounds like a way to dismiss criticism. But when progressives talk about urgency, especially around climate change, health care access, reproductive rights, or economic inequality, that urgency comes from lived experience. If you're someone who can't afford insulin, or you're watching natural disasters intensify year after year, it doesn't feel like an algorithm. It feels like survival. So from my perspective, the line isn't between real and fake urgency. It's between systemic amplification and personal impact. That said, I won't pretend progressive media doesn't amplify emotionally charged content. It does. Social media rewards dramatic framing. Cable news leans into existential language. Advocacy groups use worst-case scenarios to mobilize supporters. That happens across the board, but here's the caution I'd offer. When we reduce urgency to manufactured, we risk minimizing the concerns of people who genuinely feel threatened by policy shifts. I think the healthier goal isn't dialing down passion. It's dialing up discernment. Stay engaged. Care deeply. But don't let the emotional tone of the internet dictate your entire worldview.
Skylar, that's a fair distinction, and it's an important one, because if we're honest, urgency feels very different depending on where you're standing. If a policy directly affects your healthcare, your job, your community, your sense of security, that's not theoretical, that's personal. And I don't think dismissing that as just algorithmic noise is productive. But here's where I think all of this comes together. There's a difference between caring deeply and being emotionally hijacked. You can believe climate policy matters without living in daily apocalypse mode. You can believe border security matters without acting like society collapses every morning. You can believe healthcare reform is urgent without letting headlines spike your blood pressure every 6 hours. And what stepping away last week reminded me of is this. Real life is slower than the internet. Real conversations are calmer than comment sections. Real Americans, and whether they're conservative, progressive, independent, are not walking around screaming all day. They're working, raising kids, taking care of aging parents, trying to build something stable in a culture that monetizes instability. And if we allow ourselves to be permanently elevated, permanently outraged, permanently reactive, we lose the steadiness that self-government actually requires. Urgency has its place, but discernment has to lead. So yeah, we missed a week. Not because the world stopped, not because the fight stopped, but because perspective matters more than performance. And coming back grounded, that's strength. All right. Quick pause before we close this out. While we were down in Louisiana, beads flying, brass bands playing, me eating things that probably took 5 years off my life, a lot of you were still supporting the show, grabbing merch, grabbing coffee, sharing episodes, and that matters more than you know. Because that support is what allows me to step away for a week, be a son, be a husband, and then come back here without chasing sponsors or selling out the tone of this show. If you haven't checked it out yet, the Data and Dissonance merch line is live. Trucker hats and hoodies, Gen X shirts, bumper stickers that'll definitely make your neighbor uncomfortable. And of course, the coffee, High Lakes, Light Roast, Rock Creek, Medium, Bitter Root, Dark French Roast, roasted in the USA. Strong finish, no weak blends, kind of like this show. If you want to support what we're building here, independent, unapologetic, grounded, hit the merch store, grab a bag, grab a hat, fuel the drive home, because this only works if we build it together. You know, this week wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about who said what on cable news. It wasn't about the latest viral clip. It wasn't about the daily scoreboard of political wins and losses. It was about something a lot quieter and a lot more important. Time. Standing in Louisiana, watching my mom smile at a parade rolling by, hearing the music, feeling the air, realizing that these moments don't stack up infinitely. They pass. And once they pass, they're gone. No replay, no rewind, no archive clip you can revisit later. And that perspective does something to you. It reminds you why any of this matters in the first place. Politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from family. And family is downstream from the choices you make every day about where you put your attention. If we lose that order, if we let the outrage machine outrank the dinner table, then we've already lost something more important than an election cycle. That doesn't mean disengage. It doesn't mean stop caring. It doesn't mean retreat from the arena. It means engage on your terms, not the algorithms. It means care deeply without being controlled emotionally. It means having conviction without living in constant agitation. Strength isn't loud, it's steady. And if this show is going to last, if it's going to be more than just another voice yelling into the digital storm, then it has to reflect that steadiness. It has to reflect lived values, not just spoken ones. We missed a week, but we didn't miss what mattered. And maybe that's the reminder we all need sometimes. Step back, get perspective, then step forward with clarity. I'm glad to be back. And as always, remember to speak truth, stir thought.
Tonight's episode of Data and Dissonance is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke thriller series, The Covenant Protocol, The Prophet Directive, and Book 3, Black Echo Rising. If you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, you know those stories aren't just about action and suspense. They're about legacy, about protecting what matters, about standing firm when the world feels unstable, about men who don't wait for someone else to defend their country, their families, their principles. And honestly, being down in Louisiana last week, thinking about generations, thinking about roots, thinking about time, that theme hits a little harder. Legacy isn't abstract, it's personal. The Caleb Rourke series is available now on Amazon. Grab a copy, dive in, support independent storytelling that doesn't bend with the wind. And while we're talking about independent creation, last year we dropped Uncaged. That album was raw, grunge energy, no filter, breaking out of the box the culture tries to put you in. If you haven't listened to it, go back and stream it. That record was about refusing to be controlled, emotionally, politically, culturally. But while we were down in Louisiana last week, something new dropped. The new country album, roots, faith, heritage, a little Cajun influence in there whether I meant to or not. It's got grit, it's got heart, and it's probably the most personal music I've put out yet. That one dropped while we were at Mardi Gras, which feels fitting. Because sometimes you've got to go back to your roots to create something honest. So stream Uncaged, stream the new country record. Support independent music the same way you support independent media. Because this whole thing, the books, the music, the podcast, it's all built on one idea. Create something that lasts.